I want you to do something for me right now. And don't worry, it doesn't involve any heavy lifting or anything.
Always a good caveat for a deep dive.
Right. I just want you to visualize your computer desktop, or, I mean, if you're old school, your actual physical desk. There's a folder there, isn't there?
Oh, there absolutely is.
And maybe it's a physical pile of papers that's just, slowly turning into a geological formation on the corner of your desk. Or maybe it's a digital folder simply named MISC, or to sort. Or if you were feeling really optimistic that day, stuff to file someday.
Someday. It sounds so hopeful, doesn't it? Like a vacation destination you're definitely going to visit.
It really does. But I was reading through the source material for this deep dive, specifically this fascinating piece by Dr. Diana Hill, and she talks about this exact folder. She actually created one called To File Someday when her desktop got way too cluttered.
The logic makes total sense.
Yeah.
You put the mess in a box, you close the box, and the stress goes away. Out of sight, out of mind. The classic strategy.
Right, exactly. But here is the kicker. She says, and this is quoting the piece, "There's only one problem. I keep adding to it." And instead of feeling relief, every single time she sees that little yellow digital icon, she feels this pit in her stomach, a creeping sense of dread.
Which is such a universal experience.
It is. And the thing is, it's not because the work inside the folder is inherently hard. It's because of the feeling the folder itself triggers. It becomes this monument to, I have to deal with this, but definitely not today.
That dread is so fascinating because we almost always misdiagnose it.
Yeah.
If you ask someone why they haven't cleared out that folder or why they haven't sent that specific email, what do they usually say?
Oh, they say, I don't have time, or I'm just really disorganized, or my personal favorite, I just need a better productivity app.
Exactly. We view it as a logistical failure, a failure of time management or focus. But the massive stack of research we're diving into today, covering clinical psychology, neuroscience, behavioral therapy, it all suggests that it's completely wrong. It has literally nothing to do with time. You have the time.
Ouch. Okay, so if it's not a lack of time or a lack of focus, what is it?
It is feelings. We are going to argue today that what you call distraction, what you call procrastination, and even that mindless doom scrolling you do at midnight when you absolutely should be sleeping.
Guilty as charged?
None of that is a failure of focus. It is actually a highly successful, incredibly efficient mechanism for emotional avoidance.
Emotional avoidance, that sounds heavy. Like I need a therapist just to empty my recycling bin.
You might, but specifically in the literature, we are talking about experiential avoidance, or EA. And I want to be clear, this isn't just pop psychology. This is a core foundational concept in modern behavioral science.
Okay, let's unpack this term, because when I hear emotional avoidance, my brain goes to someone repressing a childhood trauma. I don't naturally think of someone avoiding an Excel spreadsheet. How on earth are those two things related?
That is the million-dollar question for this deep dive. To answer it, we have to look at the exact definition of experiential avoidance. We're drawing heavily from a comprehensive review by Wang and colleagues on the process model. They define it as an unwillingness to remain in contact with distressing thoughts, feelings, memories, and physical sensations.
Unwillingness to remain in contact.
Correct. It is a fundamental refusal to just be with what is happening inside your own body and mind. And here is the mechanism of how we pull this off. We employ cognition, so thinking, rationalizing, worrying, and we employ behavior.
Like scrolling.
Scrolling, drinking, working, cleaning. We use all these behaviors to escape those internal events.
Wait, hold on a second. You threw cleaning and working in there, alongside drinking and scrolling. Are you telling me that cleaning my kitchen can be a form of emotional avoidance? Because my partner would very strongly disagree. They just call it finally pulling my weight with the chores.
It depends entirely on the function of the behavior, not the form.
The function.
Yes. If you are cleaning the kitchen because the kitchen is visibly dirty and you want a clean space, that's just cleaning. But if you are suddenly hyperfixated on scrubbing the grout in the kitchen because you are supposed to be writing a difficult proposal and the mere thought of that proposal makes your chest tight,
Then the cleaning is avoidance.
and the cleaning is avoidance, it is the getaway car.
Wow. Okay, so the cleaning is just the getaway car. You are running away from the internal experience, the anxiety, the imposter syndrome, the fear of rejection, whatever that proposal triggers inside you.
Precisely. You are not procrastinating the work itself. You are procrastinating the feeling the work gives you.
I feel incredibly called out right now. I think I've detail cleaned my entire house just to avoid writing an intro for a script before.
We all have. It's human nature. And our primary mission today is to totally flip the script on how we view this. We want to move from seeing distraction as a deficit.
Like saying, oh, my attention span is broken, I'm flawed.
Exactly. We want to move from seeing it as a deficit to seeing it as a defense, a very sophisticated, highly evolved defense mechanism.
I like that framing.
So we are going to outline what we call the architecture of avoidance. We really need to understand why your brain acts like an overbearing helicopter parent. We're going to get into the neuroscience of why we are so fundamentally terrified of looking inside ourselves, what the sources call the mirror of introspection, and the specific behavioral roundabouts we get tracked on.
I really love that metaphor from the notes, the mirror of introspection. It sounds like some sort of cursed artifact from a fantasy novel.
It is a really evocative image. We are terrified of looking into the mirror of our own internal experience. The silence is deafening. So distraction, the scrolling, the podcast binging, the obsessive busy work, it is basically us taking a hammer and shattering the reflection so we don't have to see what's actually there.
Which sounds violent, but also uncomfortably relatable. So let's get into the actual mechanism here. Why are we like this? Why is my brain actively conspiring to keep me from feeling things? Because if I'm just trying to write a boring email, why does my nervous system treat it like a life or death situation?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at how the brain learns to protect us in the first place. And one of the most brilliant analogies from our source material comes from the psychology group of Fort Lauderdale. They describe the avoidant brain as an overprotective helicopter mother.
The helicopter mother brain. I can already hear it hovering over me. Put on a sweater. Don't touch that dirt. Stranger danger.
Exactly. Now think about the primary driving goal of a helicopter parent. Is it to help the child grow into a well-adjusted adult? Is it to help them learn resilience through trial and error?
Definitely not. It's to keep them perfectly safe at all times, specifically to prevent them from ever feeling pain or discomfort.
Right. And not just physical danger like a tiger or falling off a cliff, but any discomfort whatsoever. A scraped knee, a hurt feeling, a fleeting moment of social awkwardness. The helicopter mother brain wants to completely bubble wrap your reality.
Okay, I track with that from an evolutionary standpoint, but how does that apply to my someday folder? There is no saber-toothed tiger hiding in the folder.
There is to your amygdala. You see, the brain is an association machine. It learns to avoid not just the literal physical danger, but the associations of danger. It learns to avoid memories, feelings of inadequacy, thoughts of past failures.
Okay, let's role play this so I can really visualize it. Let's say I have a listener. Let's call him Bob. Bob decides he wants to write a novel. He sits down at his laptop, opens a blank document. What is his helicopter mother brain doing in that exact moment?
So Bob opens the blank page. Immediately, he feels a tiny twinge of uncertainty, a whisper of, what if this is garbage? That feeling is the trigger. The helicopter brain wakes up, alarms blaring, and screams, whoa, Bob, danger! Remember in the 3rd grade when you wrote that poem and the kids laughed at you? That hurt. We do not like hurt. Close the laptop immediately.
So it's instantly connecting a 3rd grade memory to a present-day task.
It's connecting the feeling of shame. The brain says, if you proceed with this novel, you might feel shame. Shame is painful. Pain means threat. Therefore, creative writing is a literal threat to our survival. Abort the mission.
And so Bob naturally opens a new tab and checks Twitter instead.
And he feels better, instantly. The danger is gone. The helicopter mother pats him on the head and says, good job, Bob. We successfully outran the shame monster. Let's look at some cat memes.
But, I mean, this seems like a massive design flaw. If the brain prevents you from ever leaving your comfort zone just to avoid potential danger, your world gets incredibly small.
Precisely. Ask yourself, what happens to the real-world child with the helicopter mother who never lets them play outside in the dirt?
They never learn to climb trees. They don't learn how to navigate social dynamics. They essentially never leave the house.
They end up living what the literature calls a restricted life. That is the clinical term. If your brain helicopters you away from every potential discomfort, you might be safe from the acute feeling of shame, sure. But you are also cut off from growth, from deep connection, from success. You are perfectly safe, but you are completely stuck.
This is wild. But I want to push back on this just a bit because
Yeah.
it still feels like a massive leap to say my brain treats a Word document literally like a tiger. How does the brain actually forge that link? How does it learn to fear things that haven't even happened yet? Like, say I'm terrified of a task I have literally never done before. I have no childhood trauma associated with it.
This is where we have to get a little bit nerdy, but I promise it's worth it.
Mm.
This brings us to a really fascinating, slightly dense, but absolutely crucial concept called relational frame theory, or RFT.
Oh boy. Theory time. Break it down for us, nice and simple.
RFT fundamentally explains how language creates a trap for the human mind. It explains how humans, unlike pretty much any other animal on Earth, can learn to fear things solely through words and associations without ever having a direct physical experience with a thing.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's use the one for the research. Imagine I have a friend, and I just casually mention to you, hey, my friend has a dog named Pearl.
Okay, Pearl the dog. Got it.
Now, imagine you have a severe diagnosed phobia of dogs. Maybe you were viciously bitten as a child. So to your nervous system, the concept of dog equals panic.
Right. If I even see a dog across the street, I start sweating.
But you haven't seen Pearl. You have zero idea if Pearl is a massive pit bull or a tiny teacup poodle. But if I suddenly say, hey, I'm bringing Pearl over to your house in 5 minutes, what happens to your body?
Oh, I probably start getting really nervous. My heart rate goes up. I start looking for an escape route, even though the word pearl is just a collection of sounds.
Exactly. Because of human language, the neutral word Pearl is now relationally framed with the concept of dog, and dog is rigidly framed with pain. It is a bidirectional link. You fear the name itself because it's linked to the concept, which is linked to the historical pain.
So language literally acts like a bridge for the fear. It just teleports the fear from the physical object straight to the abstract word.
Teleporter is a great word for it. The study uses another example about a forest. You might absolutely love hiking, you love walking in nature, but if I tell you very seriously, hey, there are highly venomous snakes in that specific forest, suddenly the entire forest becomes a threat. You avoid the forest to avoid the idea of the snake.
Okay, I am totally with you on the snakes and the dogs. But how does this explain why I physically cannot bring myself to look at my bank account app?
Just apply the exact same relational logic. You hold the concept of bank account in your mind. Through years of social conditioning, language, media, and maybe past stress, a low balance is relationally framed with failure. And failure is framed with rejection from the tribe. And rejection from the tribe, in our deep evolutionary history, is framed directly with death.
So the chain is bank account leads to low number, leads to failure, leads to rejection, leads to death.
Roughly, yes. And your brain processes that entire chain in a millisecond. So when you hover your thumb over your banking app, your brain isn't thinking, oh, time to do some basic math. It's thinking survival threat detected.
Yeah.
It triggers the exact same defensive circuitry as if you stepped on a snake in the woods.
That is wildly inconvenient for modern life.
It is the ultimate paradox of human cognition. The exact same language capacity that allows us to build skyscrapers and write symphonies and record deep dives also compels us to confront self-criticism and imagine terrible negative consequences that haven't even happened yet. And because we can vividly imagine them, we desperately try to escape them.
And that escape attempt is what leads us to what the source material calls the roundabout.
Yes. This is another one of Dr. Diana Hill's metaphors, and it is absolutely perfect for visualizing this.
She references that famous scene in National Lampoon's European Vacation with Chevy Chase.
Right. Look, kids, Big Ben, Parliament. And he's trapped in the rental car, and they just keep circling the roundabout in London, completely unable to merge off.
Because they're just stuck in the aggressive traffic flow.
Experiential avoidance is that exact roundabout. We circle the problem over and over. We circle the difficult conversation we need to have with our spouse. We circle the new gym routine. We circle the someday folder on the desktop.
So why don't we just turn the wheel and take the exit?
Because from the driver's seat, the exit ramp looks incredibly painful. The exit ramp is explicitly labeled feeling the shame or feeling the anxiety or admitting I messed up. So we just keep driving in circles. We tell ourselves, I'll do it tomorrow. Boom, that's another lap around the roundabout. I'll definitely check my email right after I get a quick snack. Another lap.
But here is the thing that really confuses me about this. When I decide to do it tomorrow, when I actively put it off, I feel great in that moment. I feel a massive wave of relief. If this roundabout is so bad for me, why does it feel so undeniably good?
Ah, and that is the core of the trap. Avoidance works incredibly well in the short term. This is driven by a mechanism behaviorists call negative reinforcement.
Okay, break that down for us, because I think most people hear negative reinforcement and they assume it means punishment.
It's a very common misconception. Positive reinforcement is adding something good to increase a behavior, like giving a dog a treat when it sits. Negative reinforcement is removing something bad to increase a behavior. If you have a splitting headache and you take an aspirin and the headache goes away, you are highly likely to take an aspirin the next time your head hurts. The removal of the pain reinforces the pill taking. That is negative reinforcement.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does that map onto procrastination?
If you are sitting there feeling a spike of anxiety about writing an email, the anxiety is a headache. If you switch tabs to Instagram, that's taking the aspirin. What happens to the anxiety?
It vanishes. Poof. Gone.
Immediate relief. And your brain goes, oh, wow, that worked perfectly. Good job, team. The next time we feel a hint of anxiety, let's definitely do that again. The relief physically strengthens the neural pathway between the trigger, the anxiety, and the avoidance behavior, the scrolling. You are actually training your own brain to become more distractible.
So literally every single time I procrastinate and I feel that little dopamine hit of relief, I'm basically giving my helicopter mother brain a high five.
You are handing her a megaphone. You are validating her fear.
Yeah.
You are actively teaching your nervous system. You're absolutely right. That email was highly dangerous, and thank goodness we ran away to watch TikToks.
That is deeply terrifying. It means my comfort zone is actually just a cage that I am actively building for myself, iron bar by iron bar, every time I avoid something.
Exactly. And the really insidious part is that the more you avoid, the weaker your baseline tolerance for discomfort becomes. It is exactly like a muscle that atrophies from disuse. Eventually, even tiny things, a vague text message from a friend, a mild constructive criticism at work, they completely overwhelm you and send you spiraling right back onto the roundabout.
Okay, I think a lot of listeners right now might be thinking exactly what I'm thinking. Okay, fine, I get the procrastination thing. But look, I'm not a couch potato. I don't sit around playing video games all day. I work really hard. I'm incredibly busy. I'm a productive member of society. Surely I am not avoidant.
And that right there is the biggest myth of all. Avoidance does not always look like laziness. Sometimes, avoidance looks like a promotion.
Whoa. Avoidance looks like a promotion. You have to explain that.
Let's get into what the researchers call the taxonomy of the avoidant mind. We found this fascinating breakdown using a tool called the Multidimensional Experiential Avoidance Questionnaire, or the MEAQ. It turns out there are wildly different flavors of avoidance, and some of them look very socially acceptable, praiseworthy even.
Let's break these flavors down because I have a sinking feeling I am about to be professionally diagnosed on my own show.
Let's look at type A first. The researchers call this one the striver.
The striver.
The striver fundamentally uses perfectionism, constant busyness, and overwork as their primary vehicle for avoidance.
Now, wait just a minute. I have to defend the hustlers and the type A folks here. Isn't working hard just, ambition? Why does having a strong work ethic have to be pathological?
It's not about what you are doing on the outside. It is entirely about why you are doing it on the inside. The striver isn't actually running toward a meaningful goal. They are running away from an unbearable feeling.
What feeling are they running from?
Usually the feeling of not good enoughness, a profound sense of inadequacy, identity threat. The striver deeply believes, whether consciously or subconsciously, if I ever stop working, if I sit still in an empty room for even 5 minutes, I will be forced to feel the gnawing suspicion that I am a total fraud.
So the busyness just acts as a shield, like, I can't possibly be a fraud. Look at my calendar. Look how many emails I sent by 7 a.m.
Precisely. Constant, frantic activity prevents the individual from ever encountering the underlying silence where those deep insecurities actually live. You'll constantly hear people in this category say things like, I just can't sit still. I feel incredibly guilty if I'm not being productive on a Sunday. That specific guilt, that is the exact feeling they are frantically trying to avoid.
That hits way too close to home. It's the complete inability to just be without constantly doing.
Right. If your entire sense of self-worth is exclusively tethered to your output, then stopping your output literally feels like dying to the ego. So you strive, you perfect, you over-prepare for every meeting. But it's not because you joyfully love the work. It's because you are terrified of the silence that follows the work.
Okay, so that is the striver. What about type B, the procrastinator? Now, we touched on this a bit with Bob and his novel, but the source material goes into a very specific nuance here about something called mood repair.
Yes, this comes directly from the cutting-edge research on emotion regulation. We really need to redefine how we view procrastination as a society. We usually frame it as a character flaw. I'm lazy, or I'm just naturally bad at time management.
Or I just get distracted easily by shiny things.
But the clinical research shows procrastination is actually a form of volitional dysregulation. We voluntarily, willingly delay a task, even though we fully know it will hurt our future selves. Why do we do that? Because the task triggers immediate negative affect: boredom, anxiety, shame, frustration.
So we basically prioritize feeling mildly better right now over actually succeeding later.
Exactly. The technical term is mood repair. We are desperately trying to fix our mood in the short term. The brain says, I feel yucky looking at this spreadsheet. Playing a video game makes me feel good. Let's do the video game to repair the mood.
And this is where modern technology really supercharges the problem, right? Because, I mean, back in the day, if you wanted to procrastinate on a term paper, you had to, like, doodle on a legal pad, or meticulously organize your pencils, or just stare at the drywall.
Right. The options for mood repair were fairly limited and not inherently that stimulating. But now, we have super stimuli sitting in our pockets 24/7. We have supercomputers engineered by thousands of geniuses specifically to hijack our dopaminergic pathways. This makes mood repair incredibly cheap, incredibly fast, and terrifyingly effective.
It's the absolute path of least resistance.
It is frictionless avoidance. If you feel a microsecond of boredom standing in line for coffee or a flash of anxiety before a meeting, swipe. The negative feeling is instantly vaporized, replaced by a highly engineered dopamine hit. This creates a compulsive, lifelong loop where we literally never have to build tolerance for boredom or mild discomfort. We just numb it instantly.
Which naturally brings us to type C, the number. And this section of the research brings in some really striking data on alcohol use.
This is a really illuminating study by Luoma and colleagues focusing on daily drinking habits. They specifically looked at the link between trait negative affect, which is essentially a baseline tendency to feel negative emotions, and experiential avoidance.
Because I think a lot of people would argue that having a glass of wine or a beer after a long, stressful workday is just normal adulting. Is that always considered avoidance?
Not always, and that's an important distinction. But the researchers found a very specific, troubling correlation. People who score high in negative affect and also score high in experiential avoidance tend to drink significantly more when they are completely alone.
Ah, drinking to cope.
Drinking to cope is exactly the clinical terminology. They are actively using alcohol as a chemical tool to alter the intensity of unwanted internal experiences. It's pharmacological avoidance. The thought process is, my brain is too loud, my anxiety is too sharp, this specific liquid makes it quiet and dull.
And the contrast in the data was really interesting to me. People who don't have that high avoidance trait, they might still occasionally drink alone, but they don't consume nearly as much volume.
Right. Because it is the underlying motivation that ultimately drives the toxicity of the behavior. If you are drinking a glass of wine alone because you genuinely want to savor a vintage Pinot Noir while cooking a nice meal, that's one thing. If you are drinking alone specifically to turn down the volume of your own echoing thoughts, that is avoidance.
It really seems like the unifying thread across all these types is intention, which perfectly leads to type D, the critical difference between the distractor and the avoider.
This is a vital distinction because I really don't want our listeners to walk away thinking they can literally never watch a Netflix show or scroll Instagram ever again without being pathological.
Thank goodness. Because I was about to throw my phone in the river.
Distraction can be a highly adaptive tool. If you are intensely overwhelmed, if your nervous system is completely flooded with acute emotion, or if you are just cognitively exhausted after a 10-hour shift, taking a deliberate break to watch a funny dog video to regulate your nervous system is actually healthy. That is a rest stop on the highway.
Okay, so healthy distraction is a rest stop. Avoidance is what?
Avoidance is when you pull into the rest stop, buy a house there, and never get back on the highway. Or when you pull over every 100 feet because you refuse to drive the speed limit. The golden rule of thumb is, do you have a conscious intention to return to the stressor and process the feeling? If the answer is no, if the underlying goal is permanent, indefinite escape, then it is avoidance.
That is a brutally tough question to ask yourself in the moment. Am I resting to recharge or am I running to escape?
It requires a level of radical self-honesty that is inherently very uncomfortable. And that specific discomfort brings us perfectly to the next major section of our deep dive. Why is it so incredibly hard to look inside? Why is the mirror of introspection so terrifying that we would legitimately rather scrub a toilet or work an 80-hour week than glance at our own reflection?
We're entering section 3, the neuroscience of the invisible self. And this is where things get really deep, really quickly. We have this quote in the notes from the psychologist Vygotsky about the fundamental paradox of introspection.
Vygotsky points out a structural, almost philosophical flaw in human cognitive design. When you try to observe your own anger, or you try to examine your own fear, you instantly run into an impossible problem. You are simultaneously the observer and the observed.
The quote is, "To observe one's own fear means not to be very afraid."
Right. Think about the mechanics of that. If you mentally step back to look at your fear, to analyze its shape and cause, you have to detach from the actual feeling slightly. But if you are fully in it, If you are consumed by the physiological panic, you simply don't have the cognitive bandwidth to calmly observe it. You're just panicking.
So we're caught in this binary. We're either drowning in the feeling or we're dissociated from it trying to analyze it.
And for the chronically avoidant person, neither of those options is remotely appealing. Drowning hurts, and analyzing is too close to the pain. So they instinctively choose option C. Look at something else entirely. Look at the phone. Look at the endless to-do list. Look anywhere but in the mirror.
But there is a deep biological, neurological layer to this too, right? Interoception. This was a massive part of the research stack, and frankly, I had never even heard this specific term before preparing for this deep dive.
Interoception is basically your sixth sense, and it dictates so much of our behavior. Everyone knows sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. Interoception is the conscious and unconscious sensing of your internal body states. Your heart rate, your digestion, the subtle tension in your gut, the temperature of your skin, your breath rate.
It's the internal dashboard of the human car.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the source material heavily frames the brain as a predictive coding machine. This concept is absolutely critical to understanding why we feel anxiety in the first place.
How so? Break down predictive coding for us.
Your brain is constantly, continuously running a background simulation of what your body should be doing in any given context. It holds a map. It says, okay, I'm currently sitting in a comfortable chair in a safe room. Therefore, my heart rate should be a calm 70 beats per minute. My stomach should be relaxed.
And then reality hits. You get an unexpected Slack message from your boss that just says, we need to talk right now.
Bam. Reality collides with the simulation. Your heart rate instantly spikes to 110. Your stomach physically tightens. There is suddenly a massive mismatch between the brain's prediction, which was calm, and the physiological reality, which is panic.
The dashboard lights up red. The computer throws a critical error message.
Exactly. The neuroscience term is a prediction error, and you experience this subjective error consciously as anxiety, surprise, or dread. Now, here is the crucial fork in the road. This is arguably the most important part of the neuroscience we are covering today. You have two primary neurological pathways to resolve this error message.
Okay, lay the two paths on me.
Path one is called active inference. We can call this the fixer mode. The brain says, warning, something is terribly wrong. The internal map says we should be calm, but we're shaking. We must actively change the world or change the body to force it back to the prediction.
So this is like the car's GPS just screaming, recalculating, turn around immediately, get back on the route.
Yes. It is the GPS utterly freaking out. You are off the safe route. Fix it. Fix it right now. So what do? You eat a sugary donut to chemically change the stomach sensation. You rapidly scroll TikTok to flood the brain with distracting dopamine. You completely close the email folder to remove the visual trigger. You are urgently doing something to force reality back to your baseline of calm.
Okay, that makes total sense. That's active inference. So what is the alternative? What is path two?
Path two is called perceptual influence. We can call this the feeler mode. This is when the GPS realizes you are off the planned route and simply says, oh, we are off-road. Okay, let me just update the internal map to reflect our new location.
Wait, it just accepts the error. It doesn't try to fix the panic.
It updates the prediction to match reality. The brain consciously says, my heart is racing really fast right now.
Oh.
Okay, I guess we are experiencing anxiety in this moment, and that is actually okay. I don't need to urgently fix this or run from it. I just need to feel it.
That sounds infinitely harder than just eating the donut.
Oh, it is much, much harder, especially at first. It requires overriding millions of years of evolutionary programming. It requires updating your internal map to actively accept a painful reality rather than violently fighting that reality. This is what mindfulness experts refer to as the being mode.
And the core dysfunction of the avoidant mind, the striver, the procrastinator, the number, is that we are permanently stuck in active inference.
We rely almost exclusively on it. We treat every single negative internal sensation as a dangerous malfunction that must be repaired immediately. We literally cannot just be with a sensation. We're constantly trying to hack our own internal dashboard so the warning lights will just shut off.
And because we are constantly fixing, suppressing, and running, we eventually end up with what one of the sources poignantly called the invisible self.
Yes. Because we lack the introspective tools, because we literally haven't practiced perceptual inference, our own internal world becomes totally invisible to us over time. We literally lose touch with who we actually are because we are never still enough to sit down and meet ourselves. We no longer know what we genuinely want out of life. We only know what we deeply fear.
We become complete strangers in our own house.
And biologically, structurally, this makes perfect sense. The vast majority of human brain tissue is dedicated to navigating the outside world. Conscious, deliberate access to the deep emotional centers of the brain, specifically via the medial prefrontal cortex, is highly limited. It is a bumpy dirt road, not a paved superhighway. It takes immense sustained effort to travel it.
So we basically have these ancient survival circuits, the amygdala and its friends just constantly screaming, danger! And we have no well-paved road to the rational part of the brain that could say, hey, it's literally just an email, please calm down.
Right. And avoidance is the brain's extremely blunt attempt to preemptively filter the data so those sensitive survival circuits don't even get triggered in the first place. The logic is, if I never look at the someday folder, the amygdala won't ever scream.
But we have to talk about the cost of this strategy because honestly, up to this point, avoidance sounds kind of logical. Don't trigger the scream. Sounds like a decent plan. Why is that ultimately a bad way to live?
This brings us squarely to Section 4, the consequences of the avoidant life. We touched on this briefly with the concept of the shrinking world.
Right. If you can't face the mirror, you can't really participate in life.
By systematically turning away from discomfort, we inadvertently turn away from absolutely everything that makes life meaningful. Think about it. Virtually all the best, most profound things in human life are located on the exact opposite side of discomfort.
Like intimacy.
Intimacy requires intense vulnerability. Vulnerability is deeply uncomfortable. It risks rejection,
Career success. Building a business.
requires massive risk of public failure. It requires looking stupid while you learn. That is terrifying.
Physical fitness.
Literally requires physical pain, muscle tearing, and sustained effort. If your core operating system is avoid discomfort at all costs, you systematically automatically delete intimacy, success, and health from your future. You avoid the someday folder to avoid a momentary spike in stress, but you also avoid the career growth, the financial stability, or the personal pride that is hidden inside it.
But there are even deeper psychological consequences mentioned in the Frontiers paper, specifically the loss of presence and the loss of agency.
These are heavy concepts, but they are crucial to understand the tool of avoidance. Let's look at presence first.
Okay, define presence in this context.
Presence naturally arises when we successfully minimize those internal prediction errors through acceptance, through perceptual inference. When you radically accept the current moment exactly as it is, you are actually in the moment. When you are constantly fighting the moment, trying to fix it with active inference, you are never truly present. You are always mentally projecting into the future, frantically trying to fix the next 5 minutes.
So the chronically avoidant person is basically time traveling constantly in their own head.
Always. They are either anxiously living in a hypothetical future where everything goes horribly wrong, or they are dwelling in a nostalgic past where things felt safe. They are literally never here now.
And what about agency? Because agency sounds a lot like control. Don't avoidant people want control?
They desperately want control, but avoidance actually destroys it. Agency is the deep internal feeling that you can affect change in your own life, that you are the driver of the vehicle. Chronic experiential avoidance destroys agency because you are no longer driving. Your fear is driving. You are being completely governed by your ancient survival circuits.
You're just a helpless passenger in the runaway car of your own anxiety.
Exactly. You might tell yourself you are freely choosing to watch 4 hours of Netflix, but in reality, your anxiety chose it for you because you couldn't tolerate the silence of the room. You have lost your vote in your own life.
And this chronic loss of presence and agency leads directly to what the research calls downward spirals.
This is a really vital point in the literature. This is exactly why experiential avoidance is referred to as a transdiagnostic process. It beautifully explains why someone diagnosed with severe anxiety might also struggle with binge eating, or why someone with clinical depression might also compulsively self-harm or chronically procrastinate. On the surface, they look like completely different psychiatric problems, but fundamentally they are the exact same solution.
They're all just different behavioral tools to forcibly shut up the helicopter mother?
Exactly. They all serve the exact same function, aggressively suppressing unwanted internal events. And the ultimate tragedy of the downward spiral is that the more you use these tools, the less effective they become. The dopamine hit gets weaker. So you have to use more extreme versions of the behavior just to get the same baseline relief.
Wow. Okay, that is incredibly heavy. And I think pretty much everyone listening to this deep dive right now is probably mentally identifying their own personal roundabout, whether it's pouring that second glass of wine, obsessively checking emails at 11 p.m., or endlessly scrolling the timeline. But we promise an exit strategy. We have to give people hope. How do we actually get off this ride?
We have to fundamentally shift our goal from control to acceptance. We have
Yeah.
to systematically train the brain to move from active inference, the fixing mode, to perceptual inference, the feeling mode.
Which again seems fantastic on paper, just accept your feelings, but how do we tangibly do it? Because if I could just easily accept it, I definitely would have done that years ago.
That is a completely fair pushback. Acceptance is a practice skill, not a magic switch you just flip. We have 4 concrete strategies pulled from the clinical source material. Let's start with strategy 1. Name your roundabout.
This one sounds deceptively simple.
It is simple, but structurally very powerful. This is a cognitive diffusion technique designed to physically engage that observer self, to light up the medial prefrontal cortex. When you suddenly catch yourself vigorously scrubbing the bathtub at 10:30 p.m. instead of sleeping or writing that paper stop,
Just literally freeze in place.
freeze the behavior and say out loud exactly what is happening in that moment. Here I am, caught in my striding cycle, or here I am, caught in my numbing cycle.
Why does saying it out loud actually help? Why not just quietly think it?
Vocalizing it creates a tangible physical gap, a micropause between the overwhelming feeling and the habitual reaction. It objectively labels the behavior as a recognizable pattern rather than just what I'm doing right now. It turns the invisible process visible. It is the profound difference between being the frantic character trapped in the movie and being the director calmly watching the movie on a screen.
Here I am actively engaging in mood repair because I am secretly terrified of opening this email.
Exactly. It breaks the hypnotic trance of avoidance. It wakes up the rational frontal lobe.
Okay, I love that. Name it to tame it. Let's move to strategy 2. And I'm going to be honest, this one sounds genuinely terrifying to me. Interoceptive exposure.
This is the scary but absolutely necessary heavy lifting. You fundamentally have to teach the helicopter mother brain that she is empirically wrong.
You have to practically prove that a racing heart won't actually kill you.
Yes, interoceptive exposure means deliberately, intentionally evoking the specific bodily sensations that you fear in a controlled environment.
Wait, you mean intentionally making yourself anxious on purpose? Like, why on earth would I volunteer for that?
To biologically inoculate yourself, it is exactly like taking allergy shots. You inject a tiny, controlled amount of the allergen to teach the immune system that it is actually safe. In this psychological case, you deliberately sit in the mud. You conjure up the thought of the someday folder. You feel the sharp tightness in your chest. And instead of indolently reaching for the phone to numb it, you lean entirely into it. You observe it.
And the source material specifically mentions developing interoceptive granularity here. This is the difference between a high definition and a low definition emotion, right?
Yes. Usually when we feel negative affect, we use incredibly low granularity. We say, I feel incredibly anxious, or I feel terrible. That language creates a massive, blurry, insurmountable monster in the mind.
It's just a giant amorphous smudge of impending doom.
Granularity means getting ruthlessly specific. You play the role of an alien scientist observing your own body. You ask yourself, where exactly is this physical feeling located? What shape does it have? Is it hot or cold? Is it sharp or dull?
So instead of panicking and saying, I am drowning in anxiety, I would say, I currently feel a tight constriction dead in the center of my chest. It's roughly the size of a golf ball. It feels slightly warm and it pulses every 2 seconds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what organically happens to your brain when you do that?
I mean, it sounds almost boring. It sounds like a biology textbook.
Precisely. It transforms the terrifying monster into a mundane biological specimen. When you describe the sensation with clinical precision, it instantly loses its overwhelming emotional power. It just becomes neutral data. A warm tightness in the chest is entirely manageable. I am absolutely dying of anxiety is not.
So we intentionally sit in the mud and we scientifically describe the exact texture of the mud. Okay, I can see how that defangs it. Which leads to strategy 3, the avoided exit ramp and chosen pain.
This is a profound philosophical shift in how we view discomfort. It comes from the clinical idea that actively choosing pain actually helps us transcend our own suffering. We have to stop at the roundabout and ask ourselves, what specific pain am I willing to accept right now in order to finally exit this loop?
This brings us right back to the paradox. If I willingly choose the pain, it somehow hurts less.
When pain is inflicted upon you completely against your will, it manifests as suffering. When you actively consciously choose the pain, the awkwardness of the hard conversation, the agonizing boredom of deep, focused work, it transforms. It becomes empowering. It is the ultimate return of your agency.
So I look at that dreaded someday folder on my desktop and I say, I choose the dread today. I am going to fully feel the dread and I'm going to double click it anyway.
And in that exact microsecond of choice, you are completely free. You are no longer running away. You are back in the driver's seat. You are declaring this specific feeling of dread is simply the required price of admission for my long-term peace of mind, and I am fully willing to pay it right now.
That is incredibly empowering. Finally, strategy 4, wait less, act more. This one seems to directly address the motivation trap we all fall into.
This is the highly practical behavioral tip. We so often wait until we magically feel like doing the difficult thing. I'll finally write that novel when I'm feeling deeply inspired. I'll clear out the entire folder when I wake up with high energy.
But as we know, motivation is an incredibly fair weather friend.
Motivation is notoriously unreliable. It completely vanishes the second you actually need it to overcome resistance.
Yeah.
Remember, the helicopter mother brain will literally never say, hey, you know what sounds super fun today? Facing a severe survival threat.
Never. She wants me on the couch.
Always. So you absolutely cannot negotiate with the helicopter mother. You have to bypass the internal debate entirely. Use a simple behavioral interrupt like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. You literally count backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And on 1, you physically move your body before the brain can object. You double-click the folder. You put on the running shoes. You dial the phone number.
You essentially brute force your way onto the exit ramp.
Sometimes, yes. You just have to violently turn the steering wheel before your highly evolved brain has the time to generate a convincing excuse to stop.
Wow. So let's try to bring all of these massive concepts together for everyone listening. Distraction is not a cognitive deficit. It is an incredibly effective form of emotional avoidance. We endlessly run to protect ourselves from the terrifying mirror of our own feelings.
Exactly. Procrastination is ultimately just short-term mood repair. And the only viable way out isn't to mercilessly force ourselves to focus harder, but to patiently learn how to feel, to update our internal map through perceptual inference, and truly accept that temporary discomfort is entirely safe.
It really brings us to the final thought of this deep dive. We spent a lot of time today talking about the invisible self, and I honestly think this is the most profoundly hopeful part of all this research.
I completely agree. It reframes the whole struggle.
We spend our entire lives desperately trying to silence our internal world just so we can function in the loud external one. We genuinely think the silence inside us is totally empty or that it's just scary or full of unmanageable monsters, but it really isn't.
It is simply a language we haven't learned how to fluently speak yet.
Exactly. If you can just stop running from the mirror, if you can stop constantly scrubbing the reflection away with endless distraction and busyness, you might actually find that the reflection staring back at you isn't a monster at all. It's really just you, waiting patiently to finally be heard.
And that is a meeting truly worth showing up for.
Try just one single moment of chosen pain today. Just one. Name the roundabout when you hit it. Describe the mud. See what happens when you don't run. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us.
See y'all next time.